Good morning. It's good to be with you here today, whether you're here in the sanctuary or you are watching from at home. It is good for all of us to be together. As we prepare for worship this morning, for my last service with you before I depart for my 3-month sabbatical, I offer these words by Kathleen McTeague. May they help ground us and center our minds and our hearts for worship this morning. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look in one another's faces and see there communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. Come and let us worship together.
The flaming chalice is the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. Will those of you here in person please stand as you're able for our chalice lighting? If you have a chalice at home, I welcome you to light it with us at this time. Will you please join me in reciting the words on our screen? As we kindle this flame, we recommit ourselves to the nurturing the spirits of one another and the common good of the world we share. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home. For those of you already standing, I invite you to remain standing for our opening hymn, number 100, I've Got Peace Like a River. Good morning. I'm Jason Sikoski, a member of UUFR and part of our worship team. If you're visiting us for the first time this morning, I'd like to offer you a special welcome. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively serving the common good of our shared world. Whoever you are and wherever you are on your own religious journey, you are welcome here. If you're visiting us for the first time in person, I invite you to stop by our welcome stand in the foyer if you haven't already done so. If you're a return visitor, you can pick up a more permanent name tag at our welcome stand. Or if you've lost your name tag, you can request a new one at the welcome stand as well, and I encourage everyone to wear a name tag to help us remember each other's names. If you're visiting online, I invite you to fill out our visitor form at uufr.org/visitor form. If you do this, you'll start receiving our weekly e-newsletter, The Chalice. I hope all of you will read through the chalice you received by email on Thursday about all of the great stuff happening here at UUFR. I now have a special announcement from UUFR staff member Annie Wheelis. Annie.
Good morning. I'm Annie Wheelis, and I serve UUFR as Congregational Life Coordinator. Part of my job is helping folks at UUFR find meaningful volunteer opportunities both within our walls and in the wider community. We've tried to make this process as easy as possible for you. If you're interested in serving as a volunteer or leadership position here at UUFR or joining one of our social justice efforts, including working for food security, the environment, affordable housing, anti-racism, equitable educational opportunities, or one of our many other efforts in the Triangle and wider community, there is an opportunity for you to find purpose and meaning. All you have to do is go online and fill out our volunteer and leadership interest form. Go to the website and click the volunteer tab. Once you've filled out the form, someone will contact you about how to get involved with the areas you've indicated interest. Volunteering is a great way to build connection and find community, and I hope to see your form come in soon. If you ever have any questions about any of these volunteer opportunities, feel free to reach out to me by phone or email. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. I know that I've had many of my family members volunteer. It's been a good experience. If you see a tall teenager, that's my son, Eli. Probably downstairs helping with the kids. It's been good. Okay, our social hour this morning, it's going to be downstairs in Founders Hall. I look forward to seeing each of you there and chatting. I now invite you to meet and greet your neighbors.
There will be lots of time to finish those conversations during social hour. This is the time in our service when we acknowledge some of the joys and the sorrows of our community. We do this because we believe that a joy shared is a joy made greater, and a sorrow shared is made easier to bear. This morning, we lit a candle for UUFR member Charlotte Connor, who passed away this week at the age of 106. In respect for Charlotte's wishes, there will be no memorial service, but if you wish to honor her, it was her wish that you make a donation in her name to a charity of your choice. We hold her memory in our hearts, and we send our love to her daughter, Linda, her family, and all of her friends in this time of grief. Russ Alcott shares the sorrow that his dear high school friend, Ken Rawlings, lost his 2-year battle with brain cancer on January 14th, 2023. His favorite song had this line, "Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together and try to love one another right now." He lived that, and he will be missed. Stephen Greenwaters offers a heartfelt thank you from Linda Stratford's family to all of the staff, the care team, and so many others who made Linda's celebration of life possible on January 14th. Linda would have been 1,000% overjoyed to see everyone's creativity and hard work in so many different ways to share the fun times together in her honor. And this morning, we also lit a candle of joy in honor of our new members who have joined UUFR since the beginning of December. If you happen to be here this morning and are willing to stand as I read your name, we would love to acknowledge you. Ted Spencer, Karen Jones, Alicia Pennington, Eleanor Goodwin, Judy Egbert, Thomas Flynn, Christopher Rocio, Margit Sand Kerback, Karen St. Clair, Susan Gill, Jean Marie Whaley, Matthew Kenny, Jenny Williams, Mauro Van Horn, Phoenicia Swodacki, and Faith Winter. We are delighted to have all of you among us. And as we hold these shared joys and sorrows in our hearts, and we reflect on those joys and sorrows and fears and hopes of our own lives, let's be together now for a time of stillness and silence. This is the time I invite you to close your eyes if you wish, and take just a few moments to breathe deeply and slowly. I invite you to open yourself to that spirit within us and amidst us, called by many names, but known to every human heart, that leads to a fuller, deeper, richer experience of life. And after this time of silence, we will sing hymn number 391, Voice Still and Small. But for now, let's be together in stillness and silence.
Everything we do here at UUFR is only possible because of the generosity that so many of you show this congregation. If you would like to make a contribution this morning, we invite you to bring it forward and put it in one of our offering plates. You may also give using one of the methods on the screen. In a moment, it will be time for our offering, but first, we have a brief testimonial from Marilyn Clayton for our monthly Justice Spotlight. Marilyn?
How appropriate it is to be speaking to you about the Justice Response Team on January 22nd. On this same date in 1973, the historic Roe v. Wade decision was reached by the U.S. Supreme Court. As you know, that ruling was overturned on June 24th of last year. A hastily organized rally erupted in downtown Raleigh that same evening. I heard about it online beforehand and posted it on the UUFR Members and Friends Facebook page. Although I didn't find any other UUFR members at the event, I found out later that some of you were there. On July 20th, 4 other members and I met with Reverend Sasha because we realized that UUFR needs a method to get the word out about justice events on short notice and to find one another there. By forming a group of 5, the Justice Response Team, aka JRT, was born. We created a system of communication to reach interested members who might want to join the wider community in responding to incidents, such as police and school shootings, and to raise a voice in support of women's and LGBTQ+ rights, Medicaid expansion, environmental activism, and all the moral issues embraced by the Poor People's Campaign. At future events, we will wear yellow Side with Love vests to help us find one another. Our team doesn't just publicize in-person events. Sometimes we invite you to write cards or make calls about urgent issues. One example of this was UU the Vote. A spin-off group from the brand new JRT took charge of our postcard writing campaign last fall, resulting in over 2,000 postcards sent. If time permits, we publish information in the Chalice and on the website. We also emailed the 80 congregants who have signed up to receive our action alerts. Our emails are short and to the point. If you're interested in being added to our list, you'll have an opportunity after the service. Today, Michelle McIntosh or I will help you. Next Sunday, look for Jane Hunt or me. You'll know us by our clipboards. Lisa Garcia Sampson, Director of UU Justice Ministry of North Carolina, is a primary contact person who tells us about upcoming justice events each week. If 2 people on our team agree that an issue warrants an action alert, we let people know about it. I'm thrilled that we can now keep each other better informed, engaged, and connected. Thank you so much for your interest in promoting justice, guided by our shared Unitarian Universalist principles. Together, we can make a huge difference. I will close with words from author and poet Pixie Lighthorse, a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. Hire me to be a powerful voice for the change that heals, reconciles, forgives, and improves. Transmit to me the passion to be bothered by violations of another's rights. Focus me on repairing broken systems and my participation in them. Help me to do my part to clang the bells of freedom. When 10,000 are whispering, make me one who is listening.
Thanks, Marilyn. It is now time for our offering. Please be generous. This morning's poem is Fire by Judy Brown in the book The Sea Accepts All Rivers. What makes a fire burn is space between the logs, a breathing space. Too much of a good thing, too many logs packed in too tight can douse the flames, almost surely as a pail of water would. So building fires requires attention to the spaces in between, as much as to the wood. When we are able to build open spaces the same way we have learned to pile on the logs, then we can come to see how it is the fuel and the absence of the fuel together that makes fire possible. We only need to lay a log lightly from time to time. A fire grows simply because the space is there, with openings in which the flame that knows just how it wants to burn can find its way.
Thank you, Marilyn, and also Billy and the choir. Thank you for your music this morning. I wonder if you have ever heard the story of the priest in paradise. There was once a man named Juan. He served as the priest in an impoverished farming village in the Mexican hillside. Life for Father Juan and his parishioners was difficult. They struggled every day just to make ends meet. Their days were very long, and sometimes it felt like their work never ended. And yet that work was good, too. It brought them together. By the labor of their hands, they attended to their needs. They cared for each other. And out in the fields, the work deepened their connection to the earth beneath their feet. Every Sunday, the parishioners came to church. They longed to hear Father Juan's sermons, for although Father Juan could have preached fire and brimstone, that was not his way. Instead, he preached about paradise and beauty. These sermons were like a breath of fresh air to these weary people, a cup of cool water. It was rest from the past week and fuel for the coming week. One day, the time came when Father Juan felt a need for rest and fuel too. He loved preaching to the people about the beauty of life and lush visions of paradise. But sometimes he felt tired. Sometimes the inspiration just didn't come quite the way it used to. Sometimes that image in his mind of paradise, that rich image that filled his people, just wasn't as crisp and clear as it sometimes could be. And it can be hard to preach what you don't intimately know. One day, as he was putting on his robes for Mass, he found himself muttering out loud to himself, almost as though he was praying. If only I could find the time to catch a glimpse of paradise, then my sermons would be enough to feed me and the whole parish. If I could just get that glimpse once, I'll never complain about how busy I am again. And then he stepped out the door of his humble home and was ready to walk to church. And suddenly, a sound filled his ears, the most wonderful sound, the most beautiful and miraculous sound. And stunned, he turned to the right, eager to find the source of that glorious sound. And there, on the pale green branch of a Palo Verde tree, perched a little brown and white speckled bird, a song sparrow. And captivated, Father Juan let the songbird's music just wash right over him. Its crisp, clear notes and trills rang out a complex melody. As he stood listening, Father Juan's worries just bled away. Time itself seemed to bleed away, and he fell into the moment. When at last he continued his journey to the church, he felt refreshed. A new buoyancy filled his steps, and his heart felt light. So light, in fact, that at first he didn't notice the changes. But soon he found himself pausing and blinking and looking around in confusion. Something seemed different. What was it? And then his jaw dropped as he stared straight ahead at the end of the street. "Where's the church?" he blurted out. An old woman walking her dog paused at his outburst. "What's wrong?" she asked. For a moment, Father Juan could only point a shaky finger at the pile of rubble that had once been his church. Then, after several tries, he managed, "What happened to the church?" The old woman blinked and pondered. "Well, it was before my time, so I'm not sure that I have it quite right, but when I was a little girl, my grandmother used to tell me that when she was very young, there was a church there. But then the priest disappeared one day." Father Juan's mouth opened and closed like a fish. And the old woman shrugged. Shortly after the priest disappeared, the church collapsed. I'm not sure why. I think perhaps it was an earthquake. Yes, I think that was it. The priest disappeared, and then there was an earthquake, and the church tumbled down. And at that moment, it dawned on Father Juan how tired the old woman looked. "Please, ma'am," he invited, "come and sit with me for a while and rest here under this tree." And the two sat quietly together beneath the shady branches of an olive tree and listened to another songbird sing. So, show of hands, have you ever considered taking a break from your work only to have the image like the one Father Juan saw pop into your head and make you reconsider? It's okay to admit it. There you are, considering having a little rest when you suddenly imagine all of your labors scattered and crumbled in ruins before you. Okay, perhaps that's a little bit dramatic, but we live in a society that can sometimes lure us into believing that our work depends on us and us alone. And not just on us, but on our constant presence and attention. If we step away or even look away too long, even for the moment of looking at a songbird or listening to its song, if we step away or look away too long, things could go wrong. Perhaps you felt it in your own work life, the urge to put in extra hours in the office, lest the work get out of hand. The nervousness about your upcoming medical procedure and how much of a mess may await you when you return to the office. The desire to bring work home after you clock out. Rest can sometimes feel risky. And of course, there are external pressures that can make it feel hard to step back from our work and get adequate rest. One of my friends is a teacher and has spent many long nights grading papers and planning lessons at the end of a tiring workday. She would love to leave the work at work and use her personal time for personal things, but her workplace isn't designed that way. Teachers, as those of you in this room who are or have been teachers know, are often given little or no time in the workday for planning or for follow-up. I'm seeing some nods. And so the work comes home. But however much pressure comes from the demands of the job itself, there are also these forces within us making us reluctant to rest. And for me personally, those inner pressures tend to rear their ugly little heads and whisper to me things like, "Don't stop working when the workday ends. Come on, check that email on your day off. Vacation? Who needs a vacation? Sabbatical? You fool, you can't take sabbatical. There's so much to be done." And anytime I overwork, anytime that I resist taking times to rest, it tends to boil down to one of three reasons: needing to be needed, fearing if I don't do enough, then I'm not enough, and FOMO. Perhaps you suffer from FOMO too, the fear of missing out. The truth is, our work lives occupy a huge chunk of our full lives. Not counting the time that we spend asleep each week, for working adults with full-time jobs, over 1/3 of our time is spent at work. And that's just for a 40-hour work week. A lot can happen even in a day when we step away. A lot can happen in a week or a month or 3 months, like I will be taking for my sabbatical. That's a big chunk of our lives. So yes, that fear of missing out can tug at us. And then there's that need to be needed. Raise your hand if you have ever felt that guilty pleasure, but no need to feel guilty about it. There's a reason that we sing in one of our hymns, "For needs which others serve, for services we give, we come with praise and thanks." Human beings are interdependent. We need one another. And feeling needed means feeling like we have something valuable to contribute. It reminds us that we belong. There's nothing wrong with needing to be needed in and of itself. The problem comes when it gets out of balance, pushing aside our equal need to take care of ourselves. And then there's that third related pressure that makes resting from our labors difficult at times, the belief, even the fear, that if we don't do enough, then we are not enough. And that fear does not arise from within us so much as it seeps down deep inside us from our society. Our capitalist society often values productivity over people. It constantly tells us that to be part of society, to belong, we must be producing things, especially in a workplace. And the more we do it, the better a person we are. That is what our society tells us. And so by that twisted logic, the less that we produce, the worse we are as a person. Pretty messed up, right? And it has a way of messing us up a bit too. A few years ago, I attended a protest. I remember one day a man yelled at me as he walked past where I stood holding my sign. "Get a job," he said. Now, I had a job, a full-time job, in fact. I also went to grad school full-time. To be there on that particular day, I had to come in at work at 5 in the morning so I could create space for that 2 p.m. protest. It was a busy day. And yet, even though I knew that, when he told me to get a job, I found myself feeling strangely guilty. Our society has all kinds of ways of telling us that if we are not at work, we are not doing enough, and we're not enough. And folks, this is a recipe for burnout, struggling relationships, health issues, and disconnection from the things that we find most meaningful in our lives. And I think you know that, but it needs to be said again and again because the messages from our society to the contrary are so loud. The remedy for all of these, for the fear of missing out, for that need to be needed, and for the belief that if we're not doing enough, then we are not enough, is Sabbath. The word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, the day of rest. In the book of Genesis, God worked 6 days and rested on the seventh. Now, I've never taken the Genesis story literally, of course, but I have always liked the idea of a resting God. Our society wants us to believe that resting is some kind of weakness and some kind of moral failing. And yet here is this ancient story in which a supposedly all-powerful being rests, in which the creator of moral law rests. Now, we don't have to believe in God, let alone believe that God is great and good in the way that some of our religious neighbors do, to find value in this story. Rest is good. Rest is holy. There are many ways to create space for a bit of holy rest in our lives, and let me share just 3. First, it's important to schedule it. I don't know about you, but I am absolutely terrible at taking time for rest if I don't block out space for it. No time ever quite feels right otherwise, especially when there's just so much that needs to be done. So if you are like me, get those calendars out and schedule your rest. Second, create rituals to help you rest. I used to have this glittery meditation bottle. It's based on the concept of a hush bottle that's given to toddlers to help them calm down when they're having a tantrum. You can give them to student ministers, it turns out, too. I received one at my internship congregation a few years ago. When it was a stressful day, I could shake that baby up, and then I could take a little bit of a miniature break as that thick glitter inside settled back to the bottom, and it took about 3 minutes or so. And I thought of it as a little breath of fresh air that I could take whenever I needed. It was only 3 minutes, so it didn't hurt to take it. And third, find yourself a rest co-conspirator. In fact, find yourself a whole community that values times of rest. In the same way that it can help to have somebody who is your partner when you're going to the gym to urge you on and guilt trip you into going if you decide that you're going to slack off. It can feel easier to give ourselves permission to step back from work and rest when we are not alone. And when you're part of a community that values times of rest, they can structure the workplace or the community in ways that support or facilitate regular times of rest. For example, the reason that ministers in this congregation can take sabbaticals at all is because this community values rest enough to offer those sabbaticals to your staff. In just a few days, I will be stepping away from UUFR for my time of rest, for my sabbatical. I'm not taking sabbatical because I'm burned out or something like that, but because sabbatical is something provided by this congregation, and because rest is good. More than that, rest is sacred. Sabbaths and sabbaticals help create space in our lives to deepen our connections to that which is life-giving. For ministers and some other professionals, sabbaticals are a common practice. This congregation, like many in our Unitarian Universalist tradition and beyond, offers its ministers 3 months of sabbatical leave every 3 years. The word sabbatical is a reference both to the Sabbath day of rest as well as to the biblical practice of the sabbatical year. Now, the book of Leviticus gets a bad rap, but there's some good stuff in there. In the book of Leviticus, every 7 years, people must take a prolonged break from working the fields. During that break, the fields lie fallow, helping them recover so that they will produce a bountiful harvest in the future. I find that metaphor of the fallow field helpful in understanding both what a sabbatical is and what it is not. The field lies fallow for a specific purpose, for the purpose of renewal to enable a bountiful harvest. The empty field isn't there to become the site of a roaring party or as a site for some new high-rise office. Sabbatical is not a vacation or time to pursue other work. Sabbatical is part of the normal cycle of a fruitful ministry, and it is structured specifically to restore and nurture both minister and ministry. Like the sabbatical year, sabbaticals and Sabbaths help feed and nourish us so that when we do resume our work, we do so both energized and inspired. Contrary to the story that we heard a little while ago, when ministers take sabbaticals, the time away does not leave the churches in crumbled ruins. Instead, sabbaticals are well known to leave congregations stronger. They make communities stronger not just by helping ensure that the leaders of those communities will be energized for their work, but they also strengthen communities by reminding them that the good work of the community doesn't depend on any one person, not even a minister. Many hands make light work. Many hands hold up the walls of a congregation. While I'm away, I know that my regular responsibilities will be in good hands. Reverend James and the rest of the staff will be here, and you will be here. You know, the other day, I sent an email to the lay leaders of the various ministry teams for which I am responsible here at UUFR. Perhaps you received that email because I was in awe when I looked at the list. There were 70 people on that list, and those were just those of you on coordinating teams, not the many, many people who pitch in when those teams are offering work or other opportunities. Yes, this congregation is in excellent hands. I want to leave you with the story of the 3 Sabbaths. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew. The 3 of them were neighbors. Each of them owned a few acres of farmland right next to each other. They were also all devout people who observed the Sabbath. But because they belonged to different religious communities, each of them held a different Sabbath day. For the Christian, Sunday was the Sabbath day, and so on that day she rested and did no work on her farm. For the Jew, Saturday was the Sabbath. He loved taking a break from his toils in the field to attend synagogue and study the Torah. And for the Muslim, Friday was the Sabbath day. On that day, she loved to attend the midday prayer at the mosque. One Friday in autumn, the Christian and the Jew finished plowing their fields early. They noticed that their Muslim neighbor had not yet plowed her own field. "It is supposed to rain tomorrow," the Christian said. "I know," the Jew said. "She might not get a chance to plow tomorrow if the rain doesn't let up. Let's help her out." And so the pair rolled up their sleeves and they got to work. The next day, the Muslim woman stepped outside with her umbrella, expecting to have a soggy day out in the field. But to her surprise and delight, she discovered that her field had been plowed. "Surely Allah has sent his angels to plow my field while I rested," she said. A couple months later, harvest season arrived, and a windy Saturday dawned. The Christian and the Muslim labored in their fields, bringing in the crop. Near the end of the day, they noticed that their Jewish neighbor had not yet collected his corn. Smiling in remembrance, the Muslim woman started bringing in the harvest for him, and soon her Christian neighbor joined her. The next day, the Jewish man stepped outside and discovered his harvest had been brought in. "Blessed are you, Lord," he said, "for sending your angels while I rested." And then threshing season arrived, and there came a Sunday when the Christians stayed out of her field of wheat, keeping the Sabbath. Then her Jewish and her Muslim neighbors saw that ripe grain waving in the breeze, and with smiles, they set to work threshing the grain. The next morning, when the Christian saw her neatly piled grain and her friends in the field, she smiled. "What a blessing," she said to them. "While I rested, God's angels harvested." My friends, in about a week, I will be taking my rest. I will miss you while I am away, but I will rest with confidence that our work here at UUFR will be in good hands. And now please rise and body your spirit, and let's sing number 352, "Find a Stillness." Be seated. It is time now to bring our time of worship to a close, but as we extinguish this chalice flame, its light will continue to burn in our hearts. As we go out into our daily lives, let's remember the words of the Reverend Dr. Dan Lampert. Because the daily pressure of life weighs heavily on our minds, on our bodies, and on our spirits, we need a time of Sabbath rest. Because the stresses of our culture often leave us feeling burdened and looking for hope, we need a time of Sabbath rest. Because rest, fun, leisure, and naps help us cope and feel refreshed, we need a time of Sabbath rest. Because we think more clearly, love more freely, and share more joyfully when we are well rested, we need a time of Sabbath rest. Giver of life, help us recognize when we need to stop and care for ourselves. Allow us to enjoy a Sabbath as often as we need one. Allow us to rest without guilt so that we may work with more joy. We are thankful for the gift of Sabbath rest. Amen. Blessed be, and go in peace.